The October wind bit against my cheeks as I stood beneath the golden awning of the Rosemont Grand Hotel in Palm Beach. Guests in glittering gowns and tuxedos streamed past me, their laughter echoing under the chandeliers of the marble entrance. I adjusted the hem of my black cocktail dress, clutching the ivory envelope in my hand. A man in a headset stepped forward, iPad in hand. "Name, please," he asked. "Emma Carter," I said evenly. "I'm the bride's sister." His fingers swiped down the screen, then up again. His polite smile faltered. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your name isn't on the guest list." I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes when disbelief is the only thing holding back tears. "That's impossible," I said, pulling the embossed invitation from my purse, the gold script spelling out Olivia and Daniel in looping calligraphy. "It says, RSVP confirmed." He gave a helpless shrug. "I understand, Miss Carter, but the list was finalized yesterday." A sleek white limousine pulled up behind me. The crowd shifted, phones lifted, flashbulbs flared. I turned and there she was, my sister. Olivia stepped out of the car like she'd rehearsed it for months, her wedding gown glimmering under the lights, the kind of couture dress that costs more than my annual income. She met my gaze across the steps, her eyes cool, unreadable. Then, with a smile meant for the cameras, she leaned in just enough for me to hear. "You really think you deserve to be invited?" My throat tightened, but I said nothing. Instead, I turned back to the registration desk and placed the small cream-colored envelope on the counter. "Please make sure the bride gets this," I told the attendant. "It's my wedding gift." The attendant hesitated. "Would you like me to give it to her now?" "No," I said. "Later, during the reception. The timing matters." I walked down the marble steps and into the Florida night. Inside that glittering ballroom, 600 people were about to toast, to love, to wealth, to success. And none of them had any idea that the woman they'd just excluded was the one who could destroy all of it. The hotel's reflection shimmered on the windshield of a waiting taxi. I slid inside and watched the doorman wave another line of limos forward. Somewhere in that procession was my parents, my aunts, every relative who had ever compared my small-time real estate hustle to Olivia's perfect corporate career. They'd be inside clinking glasses, proud that their golden daughter had married a tech CEO. Meanwhile, I was the invisible one again. I told the driver, "Take me to Collins Avenue." My voice was calm, but my hands were trembling. As the taxi pulled away, the laughter faded, replaced by the low hum of city traffic and the whisper of my own thoughts. We used to share everything, clothes, secrets, even a single bed in our childhood home when the air conditioning broke in summer. Back then, Olivia would cry over school bullies, and I'd promise her she'd never face them alone. Now, she couldn't even bear to face me in public. I stared out the window as palm trees blurred past. A memory flickered last Thanksgiving, her voice across the dinner table, crisp and polished. "Emma, when are you going to get a real job? Selling houses can't be your long-term plan." She'd laughed, clinking her wine glass with our mothers. I'd smiled then too, just like tonight. But smiling doesn't mean forgiving. The taxi stopped at a red light, and through the glass I caught a glimpse of my own reflection. Calm, composed, but my chest burned. I could still hear her voice. "You really think you deserve to be invited?" The words felt like an old wound reopening. For years, my family had treated me like a shadow, orbiting her success, the sister they could pity in private and ignore in public. Tonight was just the final confirmation. When the car reached Collins Avenue, I paid the driver and stepped out near a quiet restaurant overlooking the ocean. The smell of salt and grilled seafood drifted through the air. Couples laughed at tables by the window, unaware of the storm swirling inside me. I found a seat at the bar and ordered a glass of Merlot. As I took the first sip, my phone buzzed. "Mom." I let it ring. She was probably calling to say there must have been some mistake, that Olivia was just stressed that I should turn around and make peace. But there was no mistake. There never had been. Olivia had made her decision, and so had I. The envelope I'd left behind wasn't just paper. Inside it were documents, ownership papers, and a letter written in my neatest handwriting. It was a gift that would rewrite the meaning of success in our family. She'd open it later, surrounded by her new in-laws, her investors, her designer friends. And when she did, the applause would turn into whispers. The bartender refilled my glass. I stared out at the dark waves, the sound of the ocean mixing with the muffled thump of music coming from the wedding a few blocks away. Somewhere between the beat and the laughter, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. For years, I'd let them decide my worth, measured it against Olivia's promotions, her social posts, her expensive vacations. But tonight, as I sat alone, I realized how free I was. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to belong to a table that had never saved me a seat. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. "Where are you? The ceremony is starting." I typed back, "Olivia uninvited me. I'm going home." The 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then again. Finally, just 2 words. There must be. I turned off the phone. Outside, the moon glimmered on the waves. Somewhere behind me, 600 people were raising champagne flutes, applauding the couple who thought they'd built the perfect life. They didn't know that the foundation beneath it was already cracking. I finished my wine, left a tip on the bar, and walked toward the ocean breeze. My heels clicked against the pavement in steady rhythm, each step lighter than the one before. Somewhere, a violin began playing from the hotel ballroom, a song I recognized from our childhood Pachelbel's canon. Olivia used to say she'd walk down the aisle to it one day. She got her wish, but so did I, because walking away wasn't losing. It was reclaiming everything they'd tried to take from me: my peace, myself, respect, my voice. As the music faded behind me, I thought of the envelope waiting on that marble counter, sealed and silent, carrying the truth that would turn their celebration into chaos. Some gifts don't glitter when you give them. They burn when they're opened. When I got home that night, the city lights of Miami looked softer than usual, almost kind. I kicked off my shoes by the door, let my purse slide onto the couch, and walked to the window. From the 32nd floor, Biscayne Bay shimmered like liquid glass. I stared at it until my reflection began to blur. The silence of my apartment wrapped around me, calm but heavy. On the kitchen counter sat an old photo in a silver frame, 2 little girls in matching floral dresses laughing in the sunday. Olivia's arm was around my shoulders. For a second, I could still hear her saying, "Don't let go." Back then, we were inseparable. Until success became a scoreboard. Our childhood was simple in the way only small-town Florida can be. Dad was a bookkeeper at a car dealership. Mom taught 2nd grade. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Olivia, 3 years younger, was the family's shining star. She played piano at 6, spoke in full sentences before she turned 2, and teachers called her a natural leader. Mom beamed every time someone said that. "Our little prodigy," she'd say. When people looked at me, they just said, "She's the strong one." I didn't know then that strong was just another word for, "You'll have to handle it on your own." I remember my 10th birthday. Mom bought Olivia a brand new keyboard because her recital was coming up. My gift was a leather notebook from the dollar store. "You love writing," she said, as if that explained the difference. I pretended to like it. That night, Olivia practiced scales in the living room while I wrote my first story in the notebook. It was about a girl who built a castle out of broken things. Maybe I knew even then what kind of person I'd have to become. When Dad died of a heart attack a few years later, everything changed. Mom fell apart for a while, but she pulled herself together for Olivia's sake. She used to say I didn't need much attention because I was independent. Olivia got tutoring, piano lessons, summer camps. I got a job at 16 to help pay the bills. I told myself I didn't mind. Someone had to keep the lights on. But every thank you I expected never came. Instead, I heard, "Be more like your sister." Olivia went off to college in Boston with scholarships and Mom's full support. I stayed behind working days at the bank and taking night classes. She sent photos from her dorm, her laughing with friends in Harvard sweatshirts, me still counting pennies for rent. Every phone call turned into a subtle comparison. Olivia's thriving mom would say, "You'll get there someday." Someday became a wall I kept climbing, but it kept moving further away. After a few years, I moved to Miami, trading stability for a chance at something bigger. Real estate had always fascinated me, how a place could shape a person's life. I left the bank job, got my license, and started hustling. Mom called it a side gig. Olivia called it risky. I called it survival. Family dinners turned into performance reviews. Olivia, fresh from her MBA, would brag about her firm's clients and bonuses, while Mom nodded approvingly. Then eyes turned to me. "How's the house selling going, Mom?" asked once, like she was talking to a teenager with a lemonade stand. "Good," I said, though. I'd just closed a deal worth nearly $500,000. I didn't bother to mention it. Pride wasn't worth the argument. When Olivia met Daniel, everything shifted again. He was charming, ambitious, and came from old money. Mom adored him instantly. "He's the kind of man who elevates a family," she whispered after the first dinner. I became invisible that night. Olivia announced their engagement a year later at Christmas dinner, flashing a diamond the size of a grape. Mom clapped. "Dad would have been proud," she said. No one looked at me, sitting across the table, cutting into dry turkey, quietly happy for her, but painfully aware of my place in the family photo. Always the shadow, never the centerpiece. A few months later, during one of our rare sister brunches, Olivia reached across the table and said, "Emma, you should really think about long-term security. Real estate's unstable. Maybe I can get you a job at our firm." I smiled politely, pretending her condescension didn't sting. "I'm fine, Liv." She tilted her head, pity softening her tone. "Fine isn't thriving." I remember driving home that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. For the first time, I realized I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself for letting her words define me. The following year, while her life turned into a highlight reel, mine became a slow climb uphill. She posted pictures of her Hamptons vacations, her office view, her expensive wine tastings. Meanwhile, I was working 12-hour days learning to negotiate contracts that scared most brokers. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. Quiet progress doesn't trend. But I was building something solid. When Olivia announced her wedding plans, the entire family was buzzing. "It'll be the event of the year," Mom gushed. I wasn't even surprised that I heard the details secondhand. My official invitation came 2 months before the ceremony, tucked between credit card bills. The envelope was thick, embossed, and impersonal. I thought maybe this was her peace offering a chance to mend things. I was wrong. A week later, Mom accidentally sent me a screenshot meant for someone else, a group chat called Bridal Team. The thread was full of flower choices, seating charts, and jokes about keeping things elegant. Every female relative was in it, except me. When I asked, Mom stammered, "Oh, honey, we didn't want you to feel pressured since you're not." "Well, not what I asked." "Married," she laughed awkwardly. "Don't take it personally." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Then came the bridesmaid fitting. Olivia had called to invite me, but when I arrived, she looked uncomfortable. "Actually," she said, avoiding my eyes, "we decided to go with even numbers. For symmetry in the photos." The room filled with laughter. I smiled like it didn't hurt. "Of course," I said. "I'll just watch." That night I went home and sat on my balcony for hours, the city lights flickering below me. Every memory of our childhood played in my mind, the times I defended her, the nights we whispered about our dreams. She'd wanted fame. I just wanted peace. Now she had both and I had neither. But peace, I learned, isn't something you wait for. You build it brick by brick. I pulled out a small ivory envelope and set it on my desk. Inside, I placed a letter I'd written months earlier, the one I couldn't bring myself to send. It began with, "To my sister who taught me what not to become." Next to it, I laid a copy of a deed and a business card. My business card. I traced the letters of my name printed in silver: Emma Carter, Vice President, Blackwell Capital. No one in my family knew. Not Mom, not Olivia. They still thought I was selling condos to tourists. But behind the scenes, I'd built a portfolio that spanned 5 cities and managed over $500 million in assets. I'd done it quietly, deliberately, maybe because part of me wanted the truth to reveal itself on its own. As I sealed the envelope, I felt something shift inside me. The same strength they had mistaken for weakness had carried me here. For years, I let them decide my worth. For years, I thought silence made me small. But silence had been my strategy all along. I stood by the window again, watching the waves shimmer under the moonlight. Somewhere, across town, Olivia was probably finalizing her seating chart, making sure every chair was filled with people who made her look successful. She didn't know she'd already left out the one person who could change her definition of it entirely. That night before I went to bed, I placed the sealed envelope in my clutch. It was light, almost weightless, but I knew what it carried. Not revenge truth. Not anger freedom. They had spent their lives painting me as the family failure, but they'd forgotten something crucial: failures learn how to rebuild. And when we do, we don't just return stronger. We return silent, steady, and unstoppable. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, painting soft stripes of gold across my apartment floor. For the first time in weeks, I didn't wake up with that hollow ache in my chest. The wedding was over, the humiliation done, but strangely I felt lighter. The storm had passed, and what remained was clarity. I brewed a pot of coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the whiteboard on my living room wall. Across it in bold blue marker were the words, Coastal Haven Portfolio. Beneath it, a web of notes, deadlines, investor names, and zoning permits. To anyone else, it might look like chaos. To me, it was a kingdom under construction. They called me a real estate agent. They were wrong. What I really was, what I had become, was an architect of opportunity. I wasn't showing houses. I was building empires, one property at a time. Every morning began the same 2 hours of phone calls, a review of listings before the public saw them, and then meetings that never appeared on social media. My clients weren't the ones who toured open houses, they were the ones who bought entire blocks. Most people didn't know that behind Miami's glossy skyline, deals worth billions changed hands quietly, often between people who preferred to stay invisible. That's where I thrived. Off-market acquisitions, confidential negotiations, the world of silent power. It suited me perfectly. Silence had always been my greatest weapon. By 9 o'clock, I was already reviewing a stack of property assessments when my phone buzzed with a familiar name, Nathan Blake. The message was short. Conference call, in 10. Same link. Nathan was more than my mentor. He was the first person who ever saw through the mask of just a real estate girl. He was vice president at Blackwell Capital when I met him 2 years ago, a man with the kind of calm authority that made others listen. He'd once told me, "You think like an investor, not a salesperson. Stop playing small." I never forgot it. When the call began, his voice came through the speakers, steady as ever. "Morning, Emma. You ready for phase 2? I smiled, sipping my coffee. "Always. Blackwell's board approved the expansion last night," he said. "They want you to take lead on the Coastal Haven portfolio. You'll manage a $500 million fund, mostly residential redevelopment along the eastern coast." I froze for a second. "Wait, lead? You mean..." "Yes," Nathan interrupted. "Vice President of Real Estate Acquisitions. The offer's official. The contract's in your inbox." I stared at my screen, heartbeat steady, expression unreadable. For years I'd imagined a moment like this. But now that it was here, I didn't want to shout or celebrate. I wanted to breathe. "When's the public announcement?" I asked. "Not until the first quarter," he said. "But internally, everyone knows." "Congratulations, Emma. You earned it." After we ended the call, I sat there for a while, letting the silence settle. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious. Somewhere out there, people still thought I was the struggling sister, the underachiever, the one who'd never quite figured life out. And that was fine. I liked it that way. Power moves quieter when no one's watching. The truth was, I'd been climbing my way toward this for years. My first big break came 18 months ago when I saved a failing redevelopment deal in Tampa. The original investor wanted to bulldoze an old hotel and replace it with condos. I convinced them to preserve the structure, rebrand it as an eco-luxury resort, and secure federal tax credits in the process. The project's profits tripled. Nathan called it genius. I called it survival. After that word spread quietly through the network of investors who mattered. They liked me because I wasn't loud, because I didn't chase credit, because I closed. Within a year, I had my own clients, fund managers, venture groups, and old money families who didn't want their names in the papers. And then came the mansion. The first time I saw it was during a property scouting trip on Key Biscayne. A 3-story Mediterranean-style estate, white stucco walls, red-tiled roof, an infinity pool that melted into the horizon. It overlooked the ocean like it had nothing to prove. Olivia had sent me a photo of that same mansion 2 years earlier, calling it her vision board house. I remember her message perfectly. One day when Daniel's company goes public, this will be ours. But life has a sense of humor. The owner filed for a quiet sale amid a divorce. No public listing. Just an email from a broker friend who owed me a favor. I toured the house once, walked through its empty halls, and made an offer before the sun set. Cash, no negotiations. The deal closed in 30 days. The deed went straight into my safe deposit box. That house was supposed to be a gift, my wedding present to Olivia, a way to prove that success didn't have to look the same for everyone. I'd planned to hand her the keys during my toast, tell her I was proud, show her that our rivalry could end in grace. But she'd taken that choice away from me long before the wedding began. I poured another cup of coffee and opened the folder on my desk labeled philanthropy. Inside was a proposal I'd been shaping quietly, the Renewal Project. It was an initiative to use vacant luxury properties to create transitional housing for women rebuilding their lives after divorce or financial hardship. I hadn't told anyone about it yet, not even Nathan. It was the kind of project that felt like me, silent, strong, useful. My phone buzzed again, Nathan calling back. "I forgot to mention," he said. "The board wants to feature you in the internal newsletter, maybe even Bloomberg later this year." I laughed softly. "That might upset a few people," he chuckled. "Let it. You've earned your seat at the table." I didn't tell him that the table I wanted was one I'd build myself. That evening, I drove to the mansion for the first time since buying it. The gate opened smoothly, and as I walked through the grand entryway, the sound of my heels echoed across the marble floors. The place was completely furnished, white sofas, glass railings, floor-to-ceiling windows opening to the sea. I stood by the balcony, the wind whipping through my hair. For a moment I imagined Olivia here, posing for her perfect photos, drinking champagne she couldn't afford. Then I smiled to myself. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I wandered through the rooms, touching the walls, the carved banisters, the cool marble of the kitchen island. This was more than real estate. It was proof. Proof that every time someone dismissed me, I'd built something they couldn't see. Proof that every insult had been a down payment on my future. Before leaving, I took one last look around and whispered to the empty house, "Maybe this place will finally belong to someone who deserves it." On the drive home, my phone pinged a message from Mom. "Your sister's honeymoon photos are stunning. You should see how happy she looks." I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off the notifications and rolled down the window. The night air smelled like salt and rain. When I reached my building, I went straight to the balcony and stared at the city below. My reflection in the glass was clearer than ever. The woman looking back at me wasn't the girl they pitied at family dinners or the invisible guest outside the wedding hall. She was someone else entirely, calm, powerful, untouchable. I picked up the pen on my desk and wrote a single line in my journal: "Revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's light." The next morning, an email from Blackwell's CEO waited in my inbox. Subject line: "Welcome to the leadership board. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and whispered to no one in particular. She wanted to control the guest list. Now I own the building. Outside, the sun was rising over the bay, painting everything in gold. For the first time in my life, I felt exactly where I belonged. The sound of my heels against the sidewalk echoed through the empty Palm Beach streets as the laughter from the hotel ballroom faded behind me. The night air was sharp with salt and champagne, and I could still hear the muffled rhythm of music through the glass doors of the Rosemont Grand. My clutch felt light in my hand, but I could almost feel the weight of the envelope I'd left behind. Somewhere inside, 500 guests were raising glasses to celebrate perfection. Outside, I was learning how peace felt when it finally replaced humiliation. I stopped under a street lamp and exhaled. My reflection shimmered faintly in the puddle beneath me, calm, composed, unreadable. The ache in my chest was dull now, like an old bruise. I pulled my phone from my purse and stared at the silent screen. Not a single call from Olivia. Not a single apology. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe nothing at all. The receptionist's face flashed in my mind, her confused smile, her awkward sympathy when she realized I'd been erased from my own sister's wedding. I could still hear Olivia's voice through the phone earlier that evening. "You really think you deserve to be invited?" The cruelty in her tone had been deliberate, precise. But the truth was, I did deserve to be there. I just didn't need to be anymore. I crossed the street toward a small Italian restaurant glowing with warm yellow light. The chalkboard outside read pasta arrabbiata, $18. I smiled faintly. A perfect irony, arrabbiata meant angry in Italian. Maybe fate had a sense of humor after all. Inside, the air was soft with garlic and laughter. Couples leaned close over candlelit tables, waiters glided past with trays of wine. The maitre d' hesitated when he saw me alone. "Table for one?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. "By the window, please." He nodded and led me to a small corner overlooking the water. I ordered pasta and a glass of Chianti. As I waited, I took off my earrings and set them beside the candle. My hands were steady. For the first time all evening, I realized I wasn't shaking. Through the window, I could see the lights of the hotel shimmering in the distance, each one representing a world I no longer belonged to. It didn't matter. They could keep their chandeliers and photo ops. I had something they didn't, freedom. The waiter returned with my wine. "Celebrating something?" he asked with a smile. "Yes," I said softly. "A new beginning." When he left, I pulled my phone closer and scrolled through my messages. A text from Mom appeared at the top. "Where are you?" "The ceremony is starting soon." I typed back, "I wasn't invited." The 3 dots blinked, disappeared, blinked again, then nothing. I turned the screen face down and let it rest. I lifted the glass and took a slow sip. The wine was warm and bitter, perfect. Outside, a group of tourists passed by, laughing, the sound floating through the glass. For a moment, I imagined walking back to the hotel, storming into the ballroom, demanding my seat at the table that had once been mine. The old me would have done it, smiled through tears, made peace, played small, just to be tolerated. But not tonight. The pasta arrived steaming and fragrant. I twirled a forkful and tasted it, savoring the heat of the spice. It was exactly what I needed, something that burned and soothed at the same time. Around me, the room hummed with quiet joy. Nobody knew I'd just been publicly erased by my own sister. Nobody cared. And that anonymity was liberating. Halfway through my meal, the phone started to buzz. Once, twice, then continuously. I flipped it over. Mom, Olivia, Daniel, dozens of missed calls. My screen glowed like a small storm. I stared at it for a moment, then turned the sound off and placed it beside the candle again. Let them call, let them wonder. The silence between us was worth more than any explanation. I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the scent of basil and wine, and let the night wash over me. Somewhere, the reception was in full swing. I could almost picture Olivia on stage, glowing in her designer gown, Daniel beside her, both of them laughing for the cameras. Maybe they were giving speeches about family, about loyalty, about gratitude. Maybe they'd already forgotten I existed. But the image didn't hurt anymore. It only reminded me of how much I'd outgrown that world. The truth was, I'd spent years begging to be included at dinners and conversations in their version of success. Every time I tried to prove myself, they moved the finish line farther away. But tonight, when they shut me out, they unknowingly gave me the one thing I could never earn from them: permission to stop trying. I smiled into my glass. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence served with good wine. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of thunder. The ocean shimmered with distant lightning. I finished my meal slowly, deliberately, as if marking the end of an old life. When the waiter brought the check, I signed it without looking. As I reached for my coat, the phone buzzed again. This time, I glanced at the screen. 15 missed calls from Olivia. A single text followed: "Please call me." I let the message fade to gray. I stepped out into the night just as the first raindrops fell. The street glistened under the streetlights and thunder rumbled over the bay. Across the water, the Rosemont Grand stood like a crystal palace. I could almost imagine the exact moment when someone would walk up to the bride and hand her that envelope. Maybe she'd wait until the crowd was watching, expecting a check, a card, a sentimental note. Maybe she'd open it in front of everyone, confident that it was nothing important. And then maybe she'd realize her mistake. I tightened my coat and started walking. The rain turned heavier, soaking through my hair, but it felt cleansing, not cold. When I reached the intersection, I stopped under the awning of a closed boutique. The glass reflected the faint shimmer of the hotel in the distance. I thought about all the years I'd spent chasing their approval, their laughter, their recognition, their acceptance. And I realized something simple, something almost laughable: they never had the power to define me. I'd given it to them. Tonight I was taking it back. Cars hissed past on wet pavement, their lights streaking gold and red through the rain. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the city breathe. Then I opened them again, steady and clear. The rain eased to a drizzle as I walked the last few blocks to my apartment. The doorman looked up, concerned. "Rough night, Miss Carter?" I smiled faintly. "Not at all, just the kind I needed." In the elevator, I watched the floor numbers climb, each one a heartbeat closer to the quiet life waiting for me above. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the familiar calm of my apartment, the hum of the city below, the faint salt air drifting through the balcony doors. I poured myself one last glass of wine and stood by the window, watching lightning flash across the horizon. Somewhere out there, my sister was giving her speech, maybe even raising her glass, to toast the people who made this night possible. She had no idea how much those words would come back to her. I took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through me. Then I set the glass down and whispered into the quiet room, "Let the storm come." The city lights flickered, the thunder rolled, and I smiled. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to see me. I was finally standing in my own light. Inside the ballroom of the Rosemont Grand, the night glittered with champagne and arrogance. Crystal chandeliers reflected in 1,000 glasses, violins sang. Above the laughter of the city's most polished people, and at the center of it all, stood Olivia. Her smile was picture perfect, her dress catching every flash of light. To anyone watching, she was flawless. To me, if I had been there, she would have looked exactly as she always had: proud, certain, and completely unaware of the storm about to arrive. The orchestra had just started another piece when the wedding planner approached the head table, whispering something into Olivia's ear. Olivia's expression faltered, then brightened again for the crowd. "A gift from your sister, Miss Carter," the planner murmured. It was left at the front desk. "From Emma," Olivia repeated, her tone sharp with disbelief. "Well, that's unexpected." Her bridesmaids leaned closer, curious. "Open it," one of them whispered, giggling. Olivia smiled tightly. "Why not? Maybe it's a check." She does love a dramatic gesture. The laughter around the table swelled. She lifted the small cream envelope, broke the seal, and slid out the contents. A letter. A single business card. A thin document folded neatly in half. At first she thought it was a joke. The letter began to my sister who taught me what not to become. The words struck her like a slap, but she laughed, assuming sarcasm. Oh, how poetic, she said, rolling her eyes. Guests chuckled politely. But as she turned the card over, her fingers stilled. The laughter faded when she read the name. Emma Carter, Vice President, Blackwell Capital. A ripple of confusion passed through the table. Wait, Blackwell Capital, someone muttered. Isn't that the investment firm with the Manhattan Towers? Olivia blinked, her pulse quickening. It's obviously fake, she said too loudly, voice brittle. My sister sells condos in Miami, for God's sake. She grabbed the folded paper and opened it. Her eyes darted over the printed lines and color drained from her face. Key Biscayne Mansion, deed of ownership. Purchase price $3.5 million, paid in full. Owner Emma Carter. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Daniel, standing beside her, frowned. What is that? She handed it to him with shaking fingers. It can't be real. The guests leaned in, murmuring. One man pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. Within seconds, the Blackwell Capital website loaded on his screen, the company's leadership page glowing in the dim light. She's right here, he said aloud. Emma Carter, Vice President of Real Estate Acquisitions. Announced 3 days ago. The room fell silent. Every violin string, every clink of glass seemed to stop at once. The only sound left was the quiet rush of whispers spreading like fire. Daniel looked from the screen to Olivia, disbelief etched on his face. You told everyone she was struggling. I thought she was, Olivia stammered. She never said. Another guest, one of Daniel's investors, leaned forward. You mean to tell us you excluded a Blackwell executive from your wedding? His tone was more curious than kind. Do you realize what kind of connections she must have? Olivia's throat tightened. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. It was just there was a mix-up. The investor smirked. A mix-up that ended up on the internet, apparently. Phones began to glow across the room. Screens filled with the same article. Blackwell Capital appoints Emma Carter as Vice President of Real Estate Acquisitions. Her photograph sat proudly beneath the headline, confident, poised, unmistakably professional. The same sister she had dismissed as a failure was now managing a $500 million portfolio. Daniel's mother gasped. Olivia, didn't you say she barely made rent? Olivia began, but words failed. Across the room, one of Daniel's board members turned to him. Is this the same Emma Carter handling our property investments in Florida? Because if it is, you should probably call her. The blood drained from Daniel's face. You mean she's that Emma Carter? The investor nodded. Yes. She's brilliant. We've been trying to get a meeting with her for months. Olivia's world began to tilt. She clutched the back of her chair, her diamond bracelet catching the light, as if mocking her. Around her, guests whispered and scrolled, comparing notes, confirming facts. The humiliation was absolute. The wedding planner hovered uncertainly nearby. Should I take this back, Miss Carter? She asked softly. Olivia shook her head, numb. No, leave it. Daniel leaned close, voice low and cold. You told me she was embarrassing. You said she'd ruin the image of this night. I didn't know, Olivia whispered. I swear I didn't know. His eyes hardened. Well, everyone else knows now. The orchestra tried to resume the music, but no one listened. The guests had found better entertainment, the unraveling of a bride's perfect world. Cameras discreetly flashed as someone whispered, "This will be all over page 6 by morning." Olivia sank into her chair. Her mother approached from another table, face pale, clutching her pearls. What is happening? Why is everyone staring? Olivia showed her the papers. Her mother read them once, twice, then glared. You said she was unemployed. I thought she was. Olivia cried, voice cracking. She lied to us. Or maybe you just never asked, her mother snapped. The murmurs around them grew louder. Laughter from other tables turned into awkward coughs. Even the waiters slowed, pretending not to listen. Olivia's hands shook as she reread the letter. At the bottom of the page, beneath the neat handwriting, one final line glared back at her. I was going to give you the keys to your dream home tonight. But you made it clear successful people don't belong at your wedding. Congratulations on your marriage. The mansion will find a better purpose. Tears blurred the ink. The irony twisted like a knife. The mansion, the one she'd dreamed about, bragged about, posted on her vision board, had been hers to receive. Until she decided her sister wasn't worth an invitation. Guests began to drift away from her table, some glancing at her with pity, others with fascination. Daniel stood beside her, jaw tight. "I need to take this call," he said, stepping aside. She watched him walk toward the doors, phone pressed to his ear, his expression grave. She knew instinctively he wasn't calling her, he was calling Emma. The band tried to recover, striking up another tune, but no one danced. The reception had turned into a whispering gallery. Every eye followed Olivia as she sat frozen, clutching the papers that had detonated her perfect image. Upstairs in her suite, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications, messages, mentions. She scrolled through the headlines until one made her stomach twist. Sister of Blackwell VP excludes her from wedding, internet reacts. A video clip showed her laughing as she opened the envelope, mocking what she didn't understand. The comments below were merciless. At the same moment, miles away, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, swirling the last of my wine. My phone vibrated on the table, 47 missed calls. I didn't answer. I already knew what they were saying. I leaned back and smiled faintly, picturing her face as the truth unfolded, the gasps, the silence, the realization. It wasn't joy I felt, just release. In the end, I hadn't humiliated her. She'd done it all herself. For years, she'd told anyone who would listen that I wasn't enough. Tonight, in front of the people she'd tried so hard to impress, she discovered exactly how wrong she'd been. I turned off the phone, poured another glass of wine, and whispered into the empty room, "Cheers, little sister." The city outside was quiet except for the hum of distant thunder. Somewhere across the bay, under the glittering lights of the Rosemont Grand, the perfect wedding was crumbling. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt untouchable. The morning after the wedding, Miami woke up to a different kind of storm. The headlines were everywhere before sunrise. Bride excludes sister, turns out she's a Blackwell VP. The photo on the front page showed Olivia mid-laugh, holding my letter like a fool who'd just opened Pandora's box. The internet was merciless. Talk shows replayed. The clip, business blogs picked it apart, and Twitter had already crowned it the most poetic karma of the year. I stood by my kitchen window sipping coffee, watching sunlight reflect off the bay. My phone buzzed non-stop on the counter. Mom, Olivia, Daniel. Unknown numbers, it was chaos. I didn't answer a single one. The city outside looked serene, unaware that a family name was collapsing in real time. When the calls didn't stop, I switched the phone to silent. I'd spent years jumping at every notification from them, desperate to stay included. Not anymore. I poured another cup of coffee and opened my laptop. A new message sat at the top of my inbox from Blackwell's internal communications team. "Congratulations, Miss Carter. The press coverage from the leadership announcement has exceeded all projections." The irony made me smile. I hadn't planned this timing, but maybe fate had. The same night I was erased from my sister's guest list, the company had quietly published my promotion on their global site. Truth has a way of showing up right when arrogance thinks it can hide forever. By 9 a.m., the first call from Nathan came through. "Morning, Emma," his calm voice said. "I assume you've seen the news. Hard to avoid," I replied. "Blackwell's trending for the right reasons. You, however." He paused, his tone amused. "You might want to stay off social media for a few days. They're calling you the sister who played chess." I laughed softly. "Let them. I've been playing chess my whole life. They just never noticed the board." Nathan chuckled. "Well, congratulations again. You've made quite an entrance." When the call ended, I closed the laptop and stared at the city skyline. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt seen without even having to say a word. Meanwhile, across town, chaos reigned inside my parents' house. Olivia had flown back from Palm Beach at dawn, her mascara still streaked from the night before. Mom's voice could be heard through the walls, sharp and desperate. "You humiliated this family, Olivia, in front of everyone I didn't know." Olivia screamed back. "She never told us." She lied. Dad's voice, quiet but firm, cut through. "She didn't lie. You never asked." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Later that morning I received a text from Mom. "We need to talk." "You've gone too far." I didn't reply. It was fascinating how even now, the narrative twisted itself, how somehow my success was the problem, not their cruelty. Around noon, the corporate fallout began. Daniel's investors withdrew from his tech company's upcoming funding round. The statement from one of them was blunt. "We question the judgment of any leadership associated with public disrespect toward Blackwell Capital. The business world moves fast when reputation is currency." By evening, 3 more investors had pulled out. Olivia's phone must have been on fire. Mine was silent. That night, I walked along the pier, the water dark and glittering under the city lights. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Mom again. I almost didn't look, but a part of me wanted to hear her voice to see if anything had changed. I answered. "Emma," she said, her voice tight, exhausted. "What did you do to your sister?" I let the words hang there. "I didn't do anything, Mom." "She did. She's having a breakdown," she said sharply. "You ruined her wedding. Her career could be over. She ruined it the moment she decided I wasn't enough to be seen beside her," I said quietly. There was silence on the line. Then her voice softened, almost pleading. "You could have told us, sweetheart, about your job, about all of this." "We're family," I laughed under my breath. "Family doesn't ask what you do for a living just to compare paychecks. Family doesn't erase you from invitations. Don't be cruel," she snapped. "I'm not being cruel," I said. "I'm being honest." And then I hung up. Back at the Rosemont, Grand reporters were still stationed outside. They'd gotten word of the viral story and were hunting for a comment. Olivia refused to leave her suite. Daniel did damage control with the media, but his tone was defensive, brittle. One journalist quoted him saying, "It was all a misunderstanding." The article headline mocked him for it, "Misunderstanding at a $200,000 wedding." The next morning, Blackwell's PR team called again. "Emma, your composure in this situation is being praised," said the communications director. "Would you like to release a statement?" "No," I said simply. "The truth doesn't need commentary." By midweek, the story had evolved into something else entirely. Financial blogs were praising the quiet dignity of my actions. Women in business forums debated whether my choice to walk away was the ultimate power move. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Then came the voicemail from Olivia. I found it late at night after a long day of meetings. Her voice was small, ragged. "Emma, please call me. Everyone's turned against us. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, I'm sorry." For a moment I almost felt the old reflex to comfort her, to fix things, but that instinct died quickly. I poured a glass of wine instead, stood by the window and let her words fade into the air. The next day, Mom showed up at my office. I hadn't told her where it was, but I suppose desperation makes people resourceful. The receptionist buzzed me. "Your mother's here. She's insisting." I sighed. "Send her in." She entered with the energy of a woman carrying years of misplaced guilt. "Emma, this has gone too far," she said before sitting down. "Your sister hasn't eaten in 2 days. You need to fix this." I folded my hands. Fix what? The fact that I have a career, the fact that the world knows it now. She hesitated. "You're twisting things." "No, Mom," I said softly. "You've just been listening to the wrong story." She blinked, visibly thrown. "We just want peace in this family." "Peace isn't pretending nothing happened," I replied. "Peace is not letting it happen again." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. She stood up quietly and left, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and decades of denial. That night, I scrolled through social media one last time. The noise was deafening: articles, videos, interviews. But one post stopped me. A woman had written, "To every older sister who's ever been told she wasn't enough, Emma Carter just proved we were never the problem." I read it twice, my throat tightening. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about balance, restoring the scales after years of being weighed down. And sometimes that balance looked like silence. Before bed, I checked my voicemail again. 20 new messages. Olivia's voice grew more desperate with each one. "Emma, please, call me. We can fix this." But I'd already fixed it. Not by answering her, but by no longer needing to. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pouring across my bed. I stretched, took a deep breath, and smiled. The chaos was still out there online, in my family's group chats, in Olivia's unraveling image, but it no longer belonged to me. For once, the noise wasn't mine to carry. The quiet was. 2 weeks after the wedding scandal, the headlines had finally begun to fade, but the world had already changed for all of us. For Olivia, the silence was exile. For me, it was freedom. I stood by the tall windows of my new office at Blackwell Capital's Miami Tower, the morning sun glinting off the bay below. The brass plaque on the wall read Vice President of Real Estate Acquisitions. It still felt surreal. I ran my fingers across the letters, grounding myself in what was real. "Press briefing in 20 minutes, my assistant reminded me. I nodded, straightening my blazer. "Thank you, James." The hum of the office was steady and focused, the way I liked it. Gone were the days when my name came with a sigh or a smirk. Now it carried weight. Power doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it only needs to arrive and say, "I'm here." At 10 o'clock sharp, the conference room filled with reporters. Cameras clicked, pens scratched against notepads. The CEO of Blackwell, Robert Klein, stood beside me at the podium. "It's my pleasure to introduce Emma Carter," he said, smiling toward me. "She'll be leading our new $1.2 billion residential portfolio across the East Coast. Her leadership represents the future of Blackwell." The flashes exploded like fireworks. I smiled, steady and composed. A journalist from Bloomberg raised her hand. "Miss Carter, given your recent viral story, what would you say defines your success?" I took a breath. "Integrity," I said simply. "It's the only form of real estate you can never lose once you've built it." A ripple of laughter and nods followed. They liked that answer. The cameras kept clicking, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving myself. The truth had already done it for me. That evening, as I stepped out of the building, my phone buzzed with news alerts. Blackwell VP's viral scandal turns into a lesson in grace. Another headline read, "Emma Carter, the quiet power behind Blackwell's expansion." I smiled faintly. Let them write. The story was theirs now, not mine. Meanwhile, miles away, Olivia and Daniel were watching that same press conference from their penthouse. The television light cast a pale glow across their faces. Olivia's eyes were hollow. "That's me they're talking about," she whispered. Daniel didn't look away from the screen. "No, Olivia, they're talking about her." He muted the TV. The silence between them was worse than any argument. His voice was low, cold. "3 of my board members called today. They want to distance themselves from us. Apparently your sister manages half their investment properties." Olivia's hands trembled. "Daniel, please," he stood. "This isn't about the wedding anymore. It's about judgment. And right now, you've proven you don't have any." When he walked out, the door clicked softly behind him, but it sounded like finality. Olivia sank into the couch, staring at the screen, frozen on my face. The sister she'd once dismissed now broadcast across every network as a symbol of power. Back at Blackwell, I returned to my office to find Nathan waiting by the window, coffee in hand. "You handled that press circus like a pro," he said. "Years of practice pretending not to flinch," I said, smiling. He chuckled. "Welcome to the top, Emma." "Feels strange," I admitted. "Like I've been climbing a mountain that no one believed existed." Nathan nodded. That's the thing about invisible work, it builds visible empires. Later that week, my inbox overflowed with partnership offers, invitations to conferences, requests for interviews. But one email caught my eye, subject line family meeting. It was from Mom. We need to clear the air. Everyone's talking. Please meet us at Mateo's Cafe tomorrow, 7 p.m. For a moment, I hovered over delete. But something in me wanted to face it just once without fear or apology. When I arrived, the cafe was half empty, soft jazz playing in the background. Mom and Dad sat in a corner booth, both looking older than I remembered. Mom stood immediately. Emma. Her tone was rehearsed, polite. You look different. Success does that to people, I said, evenly sliding into the seat. Mom cleared her throat. Olivia's been having a hard time. People can be cruel online. Maybe if you made a statement, something kind, it might help her recover. I sipped my coffee. You mean a lie? Her face tightened. She's your sister. She made that mean nothing, I said softly. You can't uninvite blood and then expect it to show up for damage control. Dad spoke then, voice calm but firm. Your mother just wants peace, Emma. We all do. Peace doesn't come from pretending, I replied. It comes from accountability. Mom's lip trembled. You've changed. I met her eyes. No. I just stopped apologizing for being who I am. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Dad exhaled. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. It startled me more than it should have. I nodded once. Thank you. When I left the cafe, I felt lighter, not vindicated, just free. 2 days later, a new email appeared in my inbox. From Olivia. The subject line read, No excuses. Against my better judgment, I opened it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I finally understand. You were never trying to compete with me. You were building something real while I was chasing applause. I wish I'd celebrated you instead of trying to outshine you. I read it twice, then archived it. Some apologies don't need an audience. Instead, I focused on what came next. The board had approved my proposal for the Keyline Restoration Program, a redevelopment initiative for affordable coastal housing. My first independent project as a VP, Blackwell was funding it fully. I decided to allocate part of my own signing bonus to establish the Carter Foundation, dedicated to helping women rebuild their lives after financial loss. Nathan stopped by my office when he saw the paperwork. You're giving away your bonus already, I smiled. It's not giving away, it's giving forward. He leaned against the doorframe. You've turned revenge into redemption. Maybe they're the same thing, I said, just spelled differently. The following week, I flew to New York for the Women in Finance Summit. I was one of the keynote speakers, a last-minute replacement for someone who'd dropped out. Standing backstage, I adjusted the mic and glanced at the audience. Hundreds of women filled the room, their faces reflecting the hunger to be heard. When my name was announced, the applause was thunderous. I stepped to the podium, took a breath, and began. For years, I thought success was about being seen, I said. But real success is about seeing yourself clearly enough that no one else's vision can define you. The room was silent, focused. I used to think family approval was everything, I continued. Now I know approval means nothing without respect. And respect starts when you stop apologizing for existing. When I finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The applause wasn't for what I'd achieved, it was for every woman in that room who'd been told she wasn't enough. After the event, as I walked through the lobby, Nathan called, You killed it, didn't you? Something like that, I said, smiling. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened the curtains and looked out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Olivia was rebuilding her own life, perhaps realizing that the person she'd tried to bury had become the mirror she couldn't avoid. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need revenge or validation. I'd already won the only thing worth having, peace built on truth. As I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm, grounded, whole. They once erased my name from their list. Now it was engraved on everything that mattered. The article appeared on a quiet Monday morning, tucked between stock reports and real estate forecasts. Blackwell VP donates $3.5 million mansion to Women's Renewal Foundation. My assistant James placed a printed copy on my desk, his eyes bright. "You're trending again, Miss Carter. In a good way this time." I smiled faintly and took the paper. The photo showed Maria Santos, the foundation's director, standing in front of the Key Biscayne mansion. The caption read, "Former luxury property becomes transitional housing for women rebuilding their lives." I traced the edges of the page with my fingers and whispered, "Welcome home." Across town, Olivia sat at her dining table staring at the same article on her phone. Her hands shook as she scrolled. The photo of the mansion, her mansion as she had always called it, filled the screen. The cream walls, the red tile roof, the ocean beyond. The same house she'd toured 2 years ago, taking selfies in every room, promising that one day she'd live there. Now the headline confirmed what she couldn't comprehend. Donated by Blackwell VP Emma Carter. She called Daniel immediately, her voice barely steady. "Did you see it? I'm in a meeting," he said sharply. "Daniel, please. The Key Biscayne mansion, it's hers. It was supposed to be ours." There was a pause. "Ours? We never even made an offer." "But you know I loved it," she whispered. "You know I wanted it." Daniel sighed, his patience thinning. "Maybe that's the problem, Olivia. You've spent your life wanting things you didn't earn." He hung up before she could reply. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a sunlit conference room, signing the last of the donation documents. Maria's hands trembled as she watched. "Are you sure, Miss Carter? This property could sell for much more now. You could invest it. Use it. I already have," I said, signing my name with a steady hand. "The investment is here." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "You just changed the lives of 20 women." I nodded. "That's the point." As she left, I stayed behind for a moment, looking out the window. The bay sparkled beneath the morning sun, calm and endless. For the first time, the idea of giving something away didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. That afternoon, I visited the mansion one last time. The gates swung open easily, and I stepped through heels, clicking on the marble walkway. Inside, the air was cool, faintly perfumed with salt and jasmine. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting gold across the polished floors. I remembered the first time I'd stood there months ago, imagining Olivia laughing in the kitchen, posing on the balcony for her next round of curated happiness. Back then, I'd wanted to give her that dream. I wanted to believe she could love me again if I handed her proof that I'd made it. But people like her never saw love as enough, they only saw leverage. Now, as I walked through the house, I didn't see marble or ocean views. I saw rooms filled with voices that deserved to be heard. The women Maria would bring here, single mothers, survivors, women told they were too broken to start again. This place would belong to them now. The thought made me smile. That evening, as I left, the sky turned coral pink. I paused at the gate and whispered, "You were never hers. You were waiting for someone who needed you more." At that exact moment, Olivia sat in her living room refreshing the news feed over and over. The comments under the article were a chorus of praise. Finally, someone using wealth for good. A real act of class and grace. Her name wasn't mentioned once. She threw her phone across the couch, heart pounding. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She called me. The first ring felt like a ghost knocking. The second, like déjà vu. I didn't answer. By the fifth, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice cracked through the speaker. "Emma, please. I know you hate me. I know I was cruel. But you can't just give that house away. You know how much it meant to me. Daniel and I, we've been saving for years. It would change our lives." I listened in silence. When the message ended, I turned off the phone and stared at the city lights. "It already did," I murmured. "Just not yours." The next morning, the donation went public. News outlets picked up the story within hours. From exclusion to empowerment, the Carter legacy. Blackwell VP's gift to the women of Miami. I watched the live broadcast as Maria gave her statement outside the mansion's gates. "This house will now serve as a sanctuary," she said, her voice firm and warm. "It's proof that success and compassion can exist in the same heart." Reporters asked if I'd attend the ceremony, but I declined. This wasn't about me anymore. The story had already written itself. At home, my inbox flooded with messages from women around the world. Executives, teachers, mothers, each one sharing a version of the same sentence. "Thank you for reminding me that boundaries can coexist with kindness." Meanwhile, in the crumbling perfection of her penthouse, Olivia sat watching the same press conference, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her mother had stopped defending her in public. Her father barely spoke to her. The calls from investors had dried up. She'd become a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. Daniel came home late that night, exhausted, his tie loosened. "The foundation thing went viral," he said flatly. "I know," she murmured. He looked at her for a long moment. "You did this to yourself." She flinched. "Are you leaving me?" "I'm staying," he said, but his voice was void of affection. "For now." Then he disappeared into the bedroom, leaving her in silence. The next morning, Maria sent me a photo from the mansion. The first residents had moved in, women and children unpacking boxes, laughter echoing through the grand halls. One little girl stood by the balcony railing, her small hand pressed against the glass. The caption read, "They're home." I stared at that picture for a long time, my throat tight. That evening, I drove past the property one last time. The gates were open, lights glowing warmly inside. Voices drifted through the garden, soft, real, alive. For a moment, I thought I heard my younger self laughing somewhere within those walls, unburdened and proud. I parked by the curb and watched as Maria waved goodnight to one of the women carrying a sleeping child. The woman smiled, her face peaceful under the lamplight. I could almost feel the energy radiating from that house, joy where pride once lived, belonging where envy had ruled. A gentle breeze swept across the water, carrying the scent of salt and hibiscus. I whispered, "You were never supposed to be a mansion, Olivia. You were supposed to be a mirror." I got back into the car, feeling the calm settle deep into my chest. When I reached home, James had left a single note on my desk with the latest update from the foundation. "Your donation has already changed 17 lives." I turned off the lights, sat in the quiet, and smiled. She had lost her mansion. I had found my peace. The story spread faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, every major outlet had picked it up. Blackwell VP's $3.5 million donation inspires a generation. From Family Feud to philanthropy. My name was suddenly everywhere. Talk shows debated my motives. Magazines called it a masterclass in graceful revenge. I didn't correct them. They could call it whatever they wanted. For me, it wasn't revenge anymore. It was release. At Blackwell, the week moved in slow motion. Everyone wanted meetings, partnerships, handshakes. My assistant's inbox overflowed with requests from nonprofits and corporate sponsors. "You've started a movement," James said, almost giddy. "I didn't start anything," I replied, glancing out the window. "I just stopped letting other people write the story." He smiled, but I could tell he didn't understand. Few people did. By Wednesday, my name had become shorthand for poetic justice. Hashtags trended across social media: number Emma Effect, number Quiet Revenge, number Boundaries Are Power. On paper, I had won everything: the headlines, the influence, the narrative. But inside, I just felt still. No triumph, no anger, just quiet. Meanwhile, Olivia's world was unraveling. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, not with congratulations, but with pity. Her once carefully curated followers began unfollowing. Corporate friends stopped returning her calls. At a charity luncheon, 2 women whispered about her just loud enough for her to hear. That's her, the one who uninvited her own sister. Daniel's company took the hardest hit. 2 investors withdrew after discovering that I had worked with their firms through Blackwell. They called his decision-making emotionally compromised. His board held an emergency meeting that week. The outcome wasn't public, but I heard enough through quiet channels. Daniel was no longer CEO. When the news reached me, I didn't celebrate. I closed my laptop and exhaled. Actions have echoes, I thought, and hers were finally catching up. Late that night, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Sarah, the only one who had stayed in touch. Olivia's moving out of the penthouse. Daniel's done. She's back at your parents' house for now. Mom's trying to play mediator again. I typed a simple reply. Let her rest. The world's already teaching her. The next day, the foundation sent me a video update from the mansion. Children laughing in the garden. Women cooking dinner together, the sound of music floating through open windows. Maria's voice narrated softly, 23 residents, and counting. All thanks to you, Miss Carter. I smiled at the screen. That house used to be a symbol of envy. Now it was a symbol of renewal. That was a better kind of legacy than any award could offer. Across town, Olivia sat on the edge of her childhood bed, scrolling through social media, until tears blurred the words. One post cut deeper than the rest. She uninvited her own sister and lost her dream home. Karma wears heels. The photo attached was of me at the Women in Finance Summit, standing on stage in a navy suit, smiling under the headline, Grace and Power. Her phone buzzed again. Mom's voice came through tight with nerves. She's made us look like fools, Olivia. Do you realize people think we're monsters? Olivia's reply was barely a whisper. Maybe we were. When I woke the next morning, the sunlight felt softer somehow. The noise around me was still loud, but it didn't touch me anymore. I made my coffee, opened my email, and saw a calendar reminder, Keyline site visit, 10:30 a.m. The new housing project I'd proposed was finally breaking ground. A redevelopment of the old Marina district, affordable but beautiful, for women who worked hard and deserved a fresh start. As I walked through the site later that morning, Nathan joined me. He looked proud. You realize you've shifted how this company views leadership, he said. Less ego, more purpose. I smiled. Maybe purpose was the power they were missing all along. He nodded toward the horizon where cranes lifted steel beams into the sky. You've built more than property, Emma. You've built credibility. That night, another email arrived from Mom. Family meeting tomorrow at 7. We all need closure. I stared at the words for a long time. Closure. That word used to sound like peace. Now it sounded like a performance. Still, I decided to go. Not for them, for myself. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house, the same white brick place where I'd spent my childhood feeling invisible. When I walked in, the smell of old furniture and gardenias hit me like memory. Olivia was already there, sitting stiffly on the couch. Mom stood by the window, arms crossed. Dad sat in his recliner, quiet as always. Thank you for coming, Mom, said too brightly. We just want to clear the air. I took a seat. There's nothing to clear. Everything's already out in the open. Mom's smile faltered. You embarrassed your sister on her wedding day. I met her eyes. No, she embarrassed herself by trying to erase me. Olivia flinched but didn't speak. Dad finally broke his silence. Enough, both of you. What's done is done. He turned to me, his voice softer. Emma, I never said it before, but I am proud of you. For how you handled all this. For who you became. Something in me loosened at his words. Thank you, Dad, I said quietly. Mom sighed. We just want peace. Peace doesn't mean pretending, I replied. It means boundaries. Olivia's voice trembled. I've lost everything, Emma. My job, my house, my reputation. I just want to start over. I looked at her. For a moment, I almost saw the girl she used to be, the one who linked arms with me at the school fair, who whispered secrets under the covers. But that girl was long gone. You can start over, I said gently. But you have to do it without tearing someone else down first. She nodded, tears sliding silently down her face. When I left, Mom called after me. You're not staying for dinner. No, I said, turning toward the door. I've already eaten. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. I stood for a moment on the porch, breathing it in. The house behind me was filled with ghosts of expectations that no longer mattered. I didn't need to exorcise them. Just leave them behind. Driving home, I passed a billboard with my own face on it, part of a campaign Blackwell had launched rebuilding the future with integrity. I laughed softly. A year ago, I'd have thought that was ridiculous. Now it just felt true. When I reached my apartment, James had left a box on my desk. Inside was a framed article from the Wall Street Journal, Emma Carter, the woman redefining real estate ethics. I placed it on a shelf next to a photo of me and Olivia as children. Two little girls in sundresses laughing at something only we knew. I sat for a long time staring at both frames, the past and the present side by side. Karma hadn't destroyed her, it had just revealed me. Before bed, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched beneath me, glittering alive. Somewhere, Olivia was learning how to live without the mirrors she'd once relied on. I wished her well silently and sincerely. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, the promise of renewal. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just keeps shining." When I went back inside, the silence felt different, no longer empty but earned. The first thing I noticed was her reflection in the glass before I heard the knock on my door. Olivia stood in the hallway of Blackwell Capital, clutching a folder against her chest like a shield. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. For a second, she looked like a stranger. For another, she looked exactly like the girl who used to braid my hair before school. "Let her in," I told James quietly. He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." When she stepped into my office, her heels hesitated on the marble floor. Her gaze darted to the panoramic view behind me, the skyline, the bay, the life she once mocked. "You look different," she said softly. "I am." She took a seat across from me, her movements careful, like someone approaching a cliff. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city far below. Finally, she exhaled. "I didn't come to justify anything," she began. "I know what I did. I just can't carry it anymore." I folded my hands, listening. Her voice trembled. "I removed you from the guest list. I told people you were struggling. I said you'd embarrass me. I said all of it, and I meant it at the time because—" She stopped, staring down at her hands. "Because I was jealous. You had freedom. I had image. And I convinced myself one mattered more than the other." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You didn't just remove me from a list, Olivia," I said quietly. "You erased me from your life." She nodded, tears catching in her lashes. "I know, and I've lost everything because of it. Daniel's gone, the investors, the job, all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. She swallowed hard. "I want to stop feeling like this. Like I'm still standing outside that ballroom with you, watching myself make the worst decision of my life." Her words hung between us, fragile and raw. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. "You know what I've learned this past year?" I asked. "That peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you build. And you can't build it on guilt." She looked up, eyes pleading. "Then what am I supposed to do? Start over?" Without expecting applause this time, she laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. You're sitting in a glass tower. I'm living in Mom's spare room." I met her gaze, calm and steady. "That tower wasn't handed to me. It was built from every time you called me a failure." Her breath caught, and for a moment I thought she might storm out. Instead, she whispered, "I don't hate you anymore." "I know," I said. "You finally had to see me first to realize that." She reached into the folder and pulled out an old photograph. Us at a county fair, cotton candy in hand, faces sunburned, laughing at something off camera. "I found this in Mom's attic," she said, "before everything got complicated." I stared at it. We were 10 and 7. I remembered that day, the heat, the smell of popcorn, the way she'd refused to ride the Ferris wheel alone. "You held my hand the whole time," I said softly. "I was afraid of heights," she replied. "Still am." "Maybe that's why you tried to pull me down," I said. Her eyes filled again. "I'm sorry, Emma. I know it's too late, but I am. I stood and walked to the window looking out at the city. It's not too late to be different. But it's too late for us to go back. She rose slowly from her seat. You're really not going to forgive me, are you? I turned toward her. I already have. Her expression shifted from hope to confusion. Then why? Because forgiveness doesn't mean access. The words hit her like cold water. So that's it. That's peace, I said. She wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. You're so calm. How can you be after everything I did because you already gave me what I needed closure? She nodded faintly. I deserve that. No one deserves it, I said. You earn it by changing. She took a step closer. Can I hug you, please? I hesitated, then nodded once. The hug was brief, awkward, restrained, but real. When she pulled away, I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Humility. Maybe even peace. I wrote something the night of your wedding, I said, opening a drawer and pulling out a sealed envelope. I plan to read it during my speech. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the letter. The ink had faded slightly. She read the first line aloud, voice breaking. To my sister, the one I've always rooted for. May your new home be filled with love and humility. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears falling freely now. You were still trying to love me. I never stopped, I said. You just stopped letting me. She looked at me as if she wanted to say something else, but no words came. Instead, she whispered, Thank you. As she turned to leave, I said quietly, Olivia. She paused at the door. Don't come back here, I said gently. Not until you've built something of your own that you don't have to defend. She nodded, understanding. Goodbye, Emma. After she left, I sat in silence, the office suddenly too big. Outside, the city glittered beneath the late afternoon sun, each window catching the light like small unspoken apologies. Nathan appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. That was brave, he said. Which part? The part where you didn't let the past decide the ending. I smiled faintly. I think that's the only part that mattered. He nodded, then handed me a file. The Carter Women's Initiative has been approved. You're officially funded for the next 5 years. I flipped through the pages, seeing the signatures, the grant amounts, the potential. You realize this means I'll have to hire an entire new team. He grinned. You've earned the right to choose who sits at your table now. When he left, I walked to the window again, resting my palms against the glass. The city stretched endlessly before me, alive and unbothered. Somewhere out there, Olivia was walking home from this building, maybe feeling both broken and relieved. I hoped it was the latter. That night, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the bay, I replayed our conversation in my head. Every word, every silence, every small tremor in her voice. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. The moon shimmered on the water and I whispered, You were never my enemy, Olivia. You were just my mirror. Inside, my phone buzzed a message from Nathan. Congrats again. You're making history tomorrow. Attached was a press release draft announcing the launch of the Carter Women's Initiative. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of salt and jasmine. I'd spent years chasing closure and other people's apologies. But tonight I understood something simple. Peace wasn't about them. It was about me. Forgiveness wasn't a bridge to rebuild what was lost. It was a door. I closed, gently locking it from the inside, knowing I'd never need to open it again. The wind swept across the balcony, warm and steady, carrying away the last remnants of bitterness. I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the stars, and smiled. Some doors close with anger, others with grace. Either way, peace walks through. 6 months later, the skyline outside my office stretched like a painting, gold glass and air. The new Blackwell headquarters in New York felt different from Miami, colder, faster, hungrier. But I had changed too. The brass plate on my new door read Executive Vice President, Global Acquisitions. I ran my thumb across the engraved letters, half expecting them to vanish like a dream. They didn't. The morning light poured through the window, reflecting off the Central Park Reservoir far below. I stood there for a moment, coffee in hand, breathing in the silence before the day began. There were no more missed calls, No more gossip columns, no more ghosts, only work and peace. James knocked softly and stepped in. The board signed off on the European expansion. Congratulations, Miss Carter. I smiled. Thank you, James. Schedule a call with London for Friday. He nodded. And the Carter Initiative launch final approvals came through this morning. That one made me pause. The Carter Initiative had started as a scribbled idea on a napkin, a mentorship and scholarship fund for women entering real estate and finance. Now it was real. Let's announce it next week, I said, quietly. James laughed. You don't really do quiet anymore. I tilted my head, smiling. Oh, I do. You just have to listen differently. After he left, I turned back to the window. The city moved below like a machine, and yet somewhere within it lives were changing because I had chosen not to give up on mine. The thought settled deep in my chest, warm and still. Later that afternoon, I hosted a meeting for the first group of mentees, young women just starting out. They looked at me with that mix of awe and hunger I once had when I walked into rooms where I didn't belong. One of them, a girl with wide brown eyes, asked, "How do you stay confident when no one believes in you?" I smiled. You don't. You stay consistent instead. Confidence comes later. Another girl whispered, "What if your own family doesn't support you?" I paused, thinking of Mom's voice sharp with disappointment, of Olivia's laughter echoing through that ballroom. Then you build your own family, I said. The kind that claps when you win, instead of pretending not to hear. They nodded, some smiling, some wiping quiet tears. I looked around the room and thought, this is what rebuilding looks like. Not revenge, not victory, just legacy. When the meeting ended, I stepped out into the crisp winter air. Snow had started to fall, thin flakes catching in my hair. The world was hushed, like the universe holding its breath. David was waiting outside. He leaned against his car, hands in his coat pockets, that easy grin still intact. You look like someone who just solved capitalism, he teased. Just trying to keep it in line, I said, laughing. He opened the door for me and we drove through Manhattan, the city glowing against the evening snow. Dinner or celebration, he asked. Is there a difference with you? He smiled. Never. At the restaurant, the lights were dim, the kind that made every moment feel cinematic. Over wine, we talked about work travel and his new architectural project downtown. But then he leaned closer. So, how's Olivia? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't said her name in months. She's finding her footing, I think I said slowly. She started volunteering at the Women's Renewal Foundation. The mansion, actually. His eyes softened. That's beautiful. It is, I said quietly. She sent me an email last week. Short. Just said, "They said the house still feels like home. Thank you." He reached across the table and took my hand. Do you think you'll ever talk again? Maybe someday, I said. But for now, this is enough. The truth was, I didn't need more. Forgiveness had already done its job. It had turned anger into distance, and distance into clarity. Later that night, back at my apartment, I found a small envelope waiting by the door. No return address. Inside was a letter written in careful looping script. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Dear Emma, it's been a year since the wedding. I won't pretend I deserve your time, but I want you to know that I understand now. Success isn't about what you can hold, it's about who you become when you let go. I spent my whole life chasing approval. You built yours from silence and strength. I wish I'd learned from you sooner. I'm not asking for anything, not even forgiveness. Just gratitude for teaching me what grace really means. Love, Olivia. I sat down and read it twice, then a third time. The old ache was still there, but softer now, like a scar that no longer hurt when you touched it. I didn't cry. I just smiled. The next morning, I pinned the letter on the corkboard above my desk, next to the photo from my first real estate license, and a postcard of the Key Biscayne mansion now bright with new life. Around noon, I received an email from Maria Santos at the foundation. We've just reached our 100th resident. 100 women who have found safety because of your gift. Attached was a picture of the mansion glowing at sunset, laughter spilling from the windows. I stared at it for a long time. That evening, I took a flight back to Florida for the holidays. When I arrived, the air smelled of sea salt and memory. I rented a car and drove down the coast, passing familiar roads that once felt like escape routes. As I crossed the bridge toward Key Biscayne, I saw the mansion, its white walls gleaming beneath the fading Sunday. I parked outside the gate and watched from the car. Children were playing in the courtyard, chasing bubbles that caught the last light of the day. Laughter rose into the air, unguarded and pure. Maria noticed me from the porch and waved. "Come in," she called. I shook my head and smiled. "Just passing by." She walked to the gate anyway, her expression glowing. "You should know this place is changing lives. We just opened our third location, thanks to the Carter Initiative." "That's wonderful," I said softly. She tilted her head. "You seem different. Peaceful." "I am," I said, finally. I left before the sun disappeared, completely driving toward the horizon where the water met the sky. The road shimmered gold, endless and quiet. When I reached the hotel, there was another surprise waiting at the reception desk, a bouquet of lilies and a note in David's handwriting. "You keep giving the world pieces of light. Don't forget to save one for yourself." I laughed softly and placed the flowers by the window of my suite. Outside, the ocean whispered against the sand, eternal and forgiving. As I stood there watching the waves, I thought of every version of myself, the one who begged for a seat at the table, the one who stood in the rain outside a ballroom, the one who walked away and never looked back. They all existed in me, but none of them defined me anymore. Peace, I realized, wasn't a destination. It was a decision I made every day. Before bed, I opened my laptop and began writing the foreword for the Carter Initiative's first annual report. To every woman who's ever been underestimated, you are already enough. Build anyway. Heal anyway. Shine anyway. When I finished, I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and stood at the window one last time. The moon shimmered on the ocean's surface like a mirror of everything I'd become. I whispered, "Thank you to no one in particular, to the pain, the loss, the lessons. To Olivia. To myself." The wind carried the scent of lilies through the open window, and I smiled. This time my name wasn't just on a door or a deed. It was written in lives, in hope, in every quiet victory that didn't need applause. This time my name wasn't on a list, it was on a legacy. The laughter drifted through the courtyard before I even stepped inside, warm, bright, alive. It was the sound of something reborn. The white facade of the old Key Biscayne mansion gleamed against the morning sky, sunlight bouncing off its windows. A year ago, this house had been a wound. Now it was a heartbeat. Inside, the grand hall was filled with people, women, children, volunteers, supporters, all celebrating the first anniversary of the Carter Women's Foundation. I walked slowly through the crowd, trying to take it all in. The smell of coffee and fresh lilies, the hum of conversation, the echoes of children's laughter bouncing off marble floors that once only reflected silence. Maria Santos spotted me and rushed forward, her face glowing. "You made it," she said, gripping my hands. "It's your house's birthday." "Our house," I corrected, smiling. "You're the one who made it a home." She laughed softly, eyes glistening. "A year ago, this place was just a story about loss. Now it's a story about beginning again." The ceremony began in the main hall, where sunlight streamed through the tall windows like a blessing. Maria stepped up to the microphone, her voice full of warmth. "Today we honor the woman who believed that pain could be turned into purpose. The woman who gave us a chance to start again. Please welcome Emma Carter." The applause rose like a wave, gentle and genuine. I stepped forward, not with the nervous heart of someone trying to prove herself, but with the calm of someone who finally knew who she was. "I used to think success was about being invited in," I began, "about earning a place at someone else's table. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is build a new table and leave the doors open." There was quiet in the room. Not the awkward silence of uncertainty, but the kind of silence that comes when hearts listen. I once stood outside a ballroom wondering what was wrong with me. Now I stand here surrounded by women who've turned heartbreak into strength. And that's what real success looks like. Applause rippled again, soft but full of emotion. I looked out across the faces, some smiling, some crying, all alive, and felt something inside me settle. And then, near the back of the room, I saw her. Olivia stood by the doorway, hands clasped in front of her, wearing a simple beige dress. No jewelry, no makeup, no armor. Just her. For a moment, everything else faded. After the ceremony, as people began to mingle, she approached. "You built something beautiful," she said quietly. "So did you," I replied, nodding toward the children playing by the fountain. "You've been volunteering here." She smiled faintly. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I just wanted to see what grace looks like up close." I studied her face. The lines of exhaustion had softened, replaced by something almost peaceful. "Then stay for dinner," I said. "It's open seating here." Her laugh was quiet but real. "Open seating," she repeated. "I like that." Later, we sat outside together, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The breeze carried the faint scent of salt and jasmine, just like the night I walked away from her wedding. But tonight there was no bitterness in the air, only peace. "I never understood what forgiveness really meant," she said after a long silence. "I thought it was about being absolved. But now I see it's about letting go." I nodded. "Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's the moment you stop bleeding for someone else's knife." She turned to me. "Does it ever stop hurting?" I looked out at the glowing windows of the mansion, at the laughter spilling through them. "Yes," I said. "When you finally decide it's not your pain anymore." We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. When she left, it was quiet and it felt right. After she was gone, a young woman approached me, a Foundation resident named Maya. She held out a folded note. "This is for you," she said shyly. I unfolded it. Her handwriting was careful and small. "You built this place so women like me could start over. One day I'll build my own too." I felt my throat tighten. "You will?" I said softly. "And when you do, make sure the doors stay open." As twilight fell, lanterns were lit around the garden, glowing like small moons. I walked alone toward the edge of the property, where the ocean stretched endless and silver under the rising stars. The wind moved through the palms, whispering softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a worn envelope, the copy of the one I'd left on Olivia's wedding night. For a long time I stared at it, feeling its familiar weight. Then, without hesitation, I tore it into pieces and let the wind carry them away. Some stories aren't meant to be held. They're meant to be released. Standing there, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: lightness. The kind that comes when every burden has found its place in the past. Later that evening, I sat at my desk in the small office attached to the mansion. My laptop screen glowed softly, displaying the new proposal, the Carter Initiative Global Expansion Europe and Asia Division. I typed a single line under the mission statement: to create spaces where women are seen, heard, and safe enough to rebuild. Outside, laughter filled the garden again. The world kept moving, and so did I. Before closing my laptop, I opened my journal and wrote, "Peace is the final form of power." Then I looked directly at the camera I'd set up earlier to record a message for our online community. "Before I go," I said, smiling, "I want to leave you with this. A year ago, I thought losing my place at the table was the end of everything. But it was the beginning. If you've ever been excluded, underestimated, or told you don't belong, remember you're not waiting to be chosen. You already are." I paused, the sound of the ocean faint behind me. Tell me in the comments, what did you have to walk away from to find your peace? Because I promise you're not alone. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. And if you believe in stories where self-respect wins over pain, where grace outshines revenge, stay with us. Subscribe so you never miss the next story that reminds you it's never too late to start again. I smiled once more softly, like someone who had finally found home. "Thank you for listening," I said. Some stories end with applause. Mine ends with peace. And maybe your next beginning. The screen faded to black, the sound of ocean waves carrying the last line away.